Hello and welcome to the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. If this is your first episode, follow along, subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. You can always get more info in every episode at dsmsports.net. This show is so good for you guys today. I so much enjoyed this conversation, learned a lot, got inspired, got great insights. My guest on the show today is John Schwartz. He just has such an impressive career and has lots of lessons to share from it. He's been with in AHL. He's been at big brands like MasterCard and Bank of America. He was in XFL 1.0, the Vince McMahon version. He was with NASCAR for several years. The NFL, Big Ten, just lots of interesting stuff from John. I guarantee you'll enjoy this one. Have a notepad handy or make sure you can rewind back for a few things because such good storytelling from John, lots of good insights, and really interesting lessons from a really impressive career. And now he's continuing to do great stuff, mentoring the generation of tomorrow. He teaches a class at NYU. You'll hear all about the stuff he's doing with special needs players in the hockey space. Just can't say enough good stuff about this interview with John Schwartz. So here it is right now. Right back with today's guest, and I'm so psyched to be talking to him. We've had some great conversations already. We've been talking offline already and could have been recording this whole time. My guest on the podcast today is John Schwartz. He is a longtime veteran in the sports communication space with a bunch of impressive experiences and is now a professor at NYU and running courses. John, welcome to the podcast today. So psyched to have you.
Neil, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Hell yeah, we're going to have such a good chat today. There's so many good lessons to learn from you and just really be inspired by you as well. I mean, frankly, we'll get into that as well with everything you do. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, John, tell us about your career path, your stops along the way, and any tips for folks that want to do what you do.
Went to the University of Maryland where I played ACHA Tier 1 hockey. It's equivalent to like a D3 schedule. So really tough. Penn State was in our division as an example before they went D1. Had a great few years at University of Maryland. And while there, I was the team president of our hockey team. So my job was to work with the media and work with administration to see if we can get more integration opportunities between the school and the hockey team. And out of that came two internships, one with the Pittsburgh Penguins, where I spent a summer working. For those of you who are familiar with Pittsburgh, this will resonate with you. I worked at the Igloo, which was the original civic center where Elvis played. And the roof would open for certain games, for certain events, concerts and things. So really interesting place during the day. And at night, I would work at Permane Brothers, which is a famous sandwich shop where they put the meat, fries, tomato, and coleslaw all in the sandwich. And it was Pittsburgh was about 8 hours, is about 8 hours from New York City. So that was really a typical truck stop. You know, trucker would drive 8 hours, stop, grab a drink, and grab a sandwich. And so, Pittsburgh is essentially one of those gateway to the Midwest cities. So I did that at night, and I realized that I was absolutely positively done with being a student. So I dropped out. So you're looking at a college dropout who went to chase a job with an expansion American Hockey League team in Baltimore, Maryland.
Ballsy.
Yeah, well, it was. Now, mind you, I slowly finished up and got my degree, lest anyone think that I would recommend not getting your degree, but I chased this dream of being the first PR director for this franchise. We were the top farm affiliate of the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim at the time. Yep. So our logo was literally designed by Disney. It was this raccoon with the hockey stick, and it was we had sold a bunch of merchandise. It was bonkers. And then I spent about a year and a half there. It was wild and exciting. I'll tell you a little bit more about connections that I made later, but ultimately, I got a call from the GM one day. He said, come on to my office, let's talk. And I sat in his office. He said, listen, we have good news. We figured out that other AHL teams are combining the public relations director job with the play-by-play announcer job. And so we're going to merge the jobs. And I was like, wow, like I don't know how to do play-by-play, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Thank you so much for this opportunity. They said, stop me. He said, no, 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 no.
Oh
You don't
man.
understand. We're giving your duties to the play-by-play guy.
And
So that was a rude awakening. When you have your first job, you sort of fall in love with providing for yourself, being able to pay your own bills, and that was a little soul crushing. But I immediately landed on my feet at an arena football team in the Big Apple, and we were fighting against MLS, NHL, NBA, and NFL, and every single major professional league. We were this little tiny arena football team that played in the Meadowlands. So my job was to convince these big New York City media outlets, New York Times, New York Post, Daily News, Newsday, to come cover us on a regular basis. And I was able to do it. And it was a lot of fun. But I realized I kind of stopped growing. I stopped learning. I hit a wall. And I always want to be challenged in my career. So I went and took a job with, at the time, it was called Allen Taylor Communications. It was a global PR firm for sports, which was a great experience. From there, I had a little stint with the XFL, which ended officially with me being informed by watching SportsCenter that I lost my job.
the original XFL
Weeks,
for listeners. The original XFL.
yeah, the original XFL 1.0. And that was 2 weeks before my wedding. So I had to face the whole family and explain that, hey, here's what I was doing. And now I'm looking for a job. So then I spent the next probably 10 or 12 years in-house at big public companies. I was at a consumer products good company in corporate communications, investor relations. I went to MasterCard worldwide. Had a chance to work on all sorts of amazing partnerships and priceless advertising campaigns that appeared in the Academy Awards and the Oscars and the Super Bowl, worked the FIFA World Cup, just incredible experience. Went to Bank of America, spent a couple of years there, and had an opportunity when I was at the bank to go work for NASCAR, which is the sanctioning body for stock car racing in the U.S. And really amazing experience. About 8 years there. Got recruited away to go work for the National Football League as senior vice president of communications and public affairs, leading all strategic communications for the league and working with Commissioner Dell and the leadership team to make sure that we were going out with the right messaging and servicing the media and trying new things and new campaigns, et cetera. And then I was at the Big Ten for the last couple of years, doing essentially as their chief marketing communications officer. So I've run the gamut, bunch of time in-house at public companies, big brands, some time at agencies, and certainly sometimes at these big leagues. So I've been very blessed with a wonderful career.
Yeah, you've earned your step every step along the way, and so much knowledge accumulated, so much insight to glean, and I'm looking forward to learn everything from you today. And I mean, I guess as you went along in your career, and the world that you started out in, and when it comes to marketing, communications, and just fan touch points, is just light years different from where we're at today. Are there things that you picked up on early that became foundational for you that stand the test of time as mediums change, as mediums exponentially increase as well? Or do you really do have to adapt to the times, and there are no really undying principles, so to speak?
I think it's a little bit of both, Neil, right? I mean, I think the relationship that a communications professional has with a journalist is sacred. Never lie, never deceive them, and have a good give and take. And it all starts with forming a good relationship. That stands the test of time. And I think, these other things that were really important back then, I mean, I can remember, working back in the mid 90s, late 90s, and it was all about the press release. It was all about print, television, radio. It was all about doing video news releases and satellite media tours. And, if you didn't get a wire story, there wasn't a really good chance that your local story would make much of an impact. And now today, obviously, the biggest change besides social media is these properties have these massive platforms. I know we were talking about it a little earlier. I mean, these platforms are so powerful. They're so interesting. They've hired former reporters and creatives and TV producers to make it so interesting and powerful. Look what's going on with the Eli Manning project that the Giants are doing. One Jets Drive over at the Jets, and so many great things coming out of the Arthur and Blank family of businesses down in Atlanta with the Falcons and the Atlanta United FC. I mean, it's just incredible, the studio they built. And the teams and leagues are doubling down on investing in their own content. And so I would have never imagined years ago that would be the direction in which we would be headed.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of getting too big picture too quickly, like are we at the point? Will we ever be at the point where leagues and teams, do the media outlets need the leagues and teams more than vice versa? I mean, early on, you guys needed, you needed those press releases, you needed that news, that newspaper pickup, you needed that local news story, but now if you have these giant platforms, you have NFL Network, you have a reach of hundreds of millions even across social. Like, how is that? What does that relationship look like now? Do those relationship dynamics change, and is there still a need for those third-party media outlets?
Some of those dynamics change, but the fundamentals don't. You have to have great integrity and deal in honesty and plain speak, and acknowledge when you have a problem. You just got to work it out, and you have to have enough mutual respect with a journalist to be okay with that on both sides, right? But ultimately, yeah, I mean, your organization may be competing with them for news stories.
Yeah.
And there may be other platforms that are emerging that are getting stories because their networks are different. There are, some people who are in the Generation Z, well, they're forming relationships with other Gen Zers who are making the news right now, as opposed to, the quintessential, old grizzly reporters. I mean, so it is changing a little bit, but I think what's happening more is there was a disproportionate amount of focus and weight behind earned media back then.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're seeing these efforts to put messaging and campaigns out in the marketplace are through the lens of integrated marketing communications and the use of the PESO model, which was founded in 2014 as part of the book called Spin Sucks. Her name is escaping me now, but the PESO: paid, earned, shared, and owned, right? So like everything sits under that, from marketing communications to lead generation to podcasts like this, right? Mm-hmm. To brand journalism, like we just talked about, to earned media, and community service and co-branding and shared media. So, I think all of this stuff, it's never been more important than it is now, that all of these tactics work together under a codified plan that's actually on paper. Not like, you guys go off and handle this, we'll do that, and then we'll cross our fingers and hope for the best, that we don't step on each other.
Yeah.
So what I've learned over the years is, if I need to be the central clearinghouse, or comms needs to be the central clearinghouse for what everybody's going to do to support a particular thing, news event, an announcement, a campaign, that's great. We'll be the scribe and we'll put it all together, but we'll make sure everybody is aware of what other people are doing. That's the integrated part, is really hard, but it pays off the most because it results in a campaign that really feels, to use an old term, 360 degrees.
Yeah. I mean, it with social media, I mean, it's such a loaded term, obviously, but we're all media now. We all have a platform to break news, to speak on behalf of organizations. I mean, as much as people rely on the Twitter bio, what I say is not reflective of my organization. If you say something about your organization, or put some information out there, it's going to be treated as information that you are privy to. And so it truly does need to be. I mean, we've seen these even evolve in the job titles. It used to be PR. Now it's strategic communications or integrated communications, as you spoke to as well. And I even think about like the Wojs of the world and Adam Schefter's of the world and what they're doing, and it truly is not so much it's reporting, yes, but it's information brokering. It's like I'm going to tell you this and then you're going to tell me this, and we're going to sort of trade things and find that mutual value. And I kind of want to speak to that a little bit in what you started out saying earlier around the undying power of relationships, how important they always are, and like especially now, like are there instances where you want a third party media outlet to tell a story for you because it means something different coming from them in the minds of the fans, and then are you thinking about what's in it for them, and like how is there more of a mutually beneficial exchange of value, I guess, as opposed to maybe earlier in the days where it's just like, we have information, you need it, and and you need us more than we need you ultimately, or in some ways, or it's a little bit vice versa. But yeah, I'm rambling on here a little bit around just like tell me about what it means to really leverage those relationships and making sure that there's value being exchanged on both sides.
I think it's about the credibility and the street cred of a Washington Post or a New York Times or a Wall Street Journal or a Sports Illustrated chronicling a story or news event, because the news might not always be good, and you may have to deal with those situations when you're putting out news or you're responding to an inquiry. And so that trust exchange is extraordinarily important. But also, these outlets are going to cover news either way, good, bad, and different, right? So why not work with somebody you trust to get your story out there in a way that's straight? And the value exchange there could be, you get it first, you get it exclusively, sit on it for a while. We may, may be able to do more for you. And so that part is not something it's sort of whispered in the halls, like those sort of like exchanges, right? But it's part of the sauce of what we do. And I think the backbone of those instances really is trust.
Yeah. Take me back to because you do have such a good breadth of experience from these smaller properties to the biggest properties in the world. I mean, if you think about the NFL and NASCAR and the Big Ten, but even back in like the arena football days or AHL days, what was a big win in those? Like, what we think about going viral today, like if Mr. Beast mentions your team, like you are jumping for joy. But when in the pre-internet days, pre-social media days, what did that look like, and how did you kind of do some of those principles still make sense today? I guess so. Like, yeah, what was like a big win in the pre-social days, pre-internet days, and how does that look today?
Probably a big win would have been a great feature story on your star player in the Baltimore Sun, right? Or even just people, a big outlet like the Washington Post picking up a game story, right? Those are things that would get you energized. But I think, sometimes the big wins really don't materialize until much, much later in life. I'll give you a couple examples. When I was in Baltimore at the AHL team, I ran the press box, which meant that I was responsible for the game notes, making sure everybody had what they need, stocking the sodas and the waters, and cooking the hot dogs and handing them out. And I forged a handful of meaningful relationships in that press box that I still carry with me to this day. And I'll give you a couple examples. One is there was a kid who was fresh out of college. His name was Jason Lockenfora, and he was one of the writers for the Baltimore Sun. And of course, now today he's one of obviously he's most renowned for his role as a CBS NFL insider. And I got a chance to work with him again at the NFL. We were both on the other sides of our career, but it all connects, right? And there was another person who was in the press box. He was writing for, I believe, a little bit for the Sun and maybe a couple other small outlets, named Brant James. Brant went on to work for Sports Illustrated, ESPN, USA Today, and when I was at NASCAR, I work with him all the time.
Yeah.
And so we look back on those days and think about how breaking news in that time was a lot more simpler, and it was a little bit more, it was very, very high touch, and it wasn't sort of an arms race to see who can get it out first. And so I think those are some of the big changes that you've seen. But again, it's all based on those relationships. I'll give you another example. I met a gentleman in that same press box named Howard Dolgan. He was the owner of the Syracuse Crunch. So we were the farm team for the Ducks. The Crunch was the farm team. Today they're the farm team of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So when I left, years later, I was at Arena Football, and I answered an ad in the New York Times, this big New York City PR agency, Allen Taylor Communications. Today, they're known as Taylor Strategy. They were hiring a senior account associate, or I don't remember what the position was. I went in to interview, and before I went in to interview, I hit the men's room. And in the men's room, I run into Howard Dolgan. And he said, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to interview for a job. What are you doing here?" He's like, "Well, I co-own this agency with Allen Taylor. The guy's his name's on the door." And I'm like, "Really?" I had no idea. I guess I lost track. And he's like, "Stop talking. Follow me." So he marched me. He marched me into Allen Taylor's office. Allen was having a meeting at the time.
Wow.
Picked the guy out and said, "This is John Schwartz. He took care of me in Baltimore. He's a really dedicated, hardworking person. We need him on our team here at Allen Taylor Communications." And Allen hired me on the spot. So everything connects. And I think everything, another piece of advice that I got from someone who I hold near and dear to my heart, everything communicates. The way you speak, the way you write, your body language, the clothes you choose to wear, your level of participation, the things you do, how you carry yourself on social media, your attitude, are you on time, and do you have good self-awareness? And, the words you choose really do matter. And you need to sort of be mindful that everything communicates all the time. So never burn a bridge, and always try and project positivity and optimism.
Yeah. I mean, it truly does hit home for me and probably for anyone listening, and in that there's networking in every element of it. It's how good is your network? How good at your networking? How genuine are you with networking? And it's I mean, the examples you speak to are just tailor made there. It speaks to it perfectly, and it's not just getting a job, but it's also getting a story placed, or someone you might run into generations later, decades later, that you can find yourself in the same circles. I love hearing that.
But on the other side too, I mean, you bring up a good point. Different generations. Today, we have more generations in the workplace than we ever have before. There are 4 or 5 generations in the workplace. That's crazy. We have baby boomers working with Gen Zers, and even some silent generation people are hanging on. And that's a really complex environment. And so that's why it's important for you to continue to give back, like the people before you gave to you, gave you time, gave you advice, gave you energy, gave you motivation. And so that's why I'm such a big believer in the power of mentoring. And there's no better example of mentoring than in sports. And that's why I think, I was talking to you a little bit before that I do these, I did this, I do mentoring. I spend most of my Fridays mentoring young people. And the other day I said, "The hell with it. I'm going to try to do this as an office hours," because I'm a professor and it's a school. So I called it "quote unquote" office hours. And people would sign up, and I had 4 amazing discussions with young people about their life and their aspirations and their careers. And it was just incredible. I bought them coffee, and there was no strings attached. And I think, those relationships are the ones that stand the test of time.
I love it. I mean, I'm a big believer in networking without like an agenda. It's not like, what can you do for me? It's just, helping each other out, and, going through this crazy path together, and learning from each other and teaching each other. And yeah, there may be some times where you can open a door for somebody and vice versa, but that should not be the foundation of a relationship. Then it just becomes transactional in that sense.
It does. And I think, everybody and every generation communicates and expresses themselves differently. And so it's not just on the older generations, it's on everybody to adapt, right? I think, when I was coming up, we had to adapt to the status quo. We had to adapt to the older generations, the silent generation, the baby boomers. I'm a Gen Xer.
Mm-hmm.
We have to adapt or die, right? Like either you sink or swim. Do your work, shut up, don't complain, right?
Yeah.
And now it's a little different, and that's okay. And everyone needs to sort of adapt to the styles of all those 4 or 5 generations. And one of the things I do with my NYU students is I know it sounds silly, but I do a feelings check every class, sort of, how are we feeling? Are we feeling confident? Are we feeling prepared? Do we need help? Are we excited? Are we bored? And I sort of keep track, and it's not for them. It's for me.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know if my swerve is clicking with them. Right? Because if I'm not, I need to change it. I need to find another way to reach them. And so it's about figuring out how I could better serve their needs. Because ultimately, that's the power dynamic. You're always trying to figure out how to serve, your boss or older generations, if your boss is even older than you are in this day and age. So I think it's really important to adapt your style.
Before we leave this subject of networking, because there's so much more we have to talk about, John. We have a ton more to cover. But what would you speak to for someone who's introverted or someone who's not as outgoing and wanting to talk to people? I mean, I even myself, I'll put in that category as well. Like I'm not the type to go out and get beers late at night, and network in that sense. So are there different pathways to build that network, to build these genuine relationships, even if you're not, the most gregarious person?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the philosophy in many ways behind LinkedIn, right? You could, I don't like to use this phrase, but you can stay behind the keyboard and not have that real life interaction until you're ready. And by the way in which you modify, update, and edit your profile, one, and two, what your content strategy is, you can attract certain kinds of people. Mm-hmm. And you could make yourself get yourself in a position to reach out to them proactively and see if they want to have coffee. Hey, can I pick your brain? You know what? I'm at this point in my career and I could really use some advice. I saw you do the X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And that's how it starts. It's sort of like fewer, bigger, better, right? Fewer, deeper interactions than just blasting out, trying to see how many followers you can get. So I think that's one way. And the other way is just starting with your own network and see if you can get, personalized introductions.
Yeah. It's a lot easier that way than just going in cold, or to your point, like just spraying and praying and putting a form message out there to everybody and anybody. That's not the
But I think, yeah, and I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, Neil, but I think like it's one thing to add somebody to your network, but you and I made a commitment to each other. We're going to stay in touch. We're going to follow up. But a lot of people I speak to, it's a parent who I know, and their daughter or son is trying to go into a certain direction, and we have this great call, and then I never hear from them again. That's a missed opportunity for them, because if they continue to stay, use the relationship and tap in, or if I'm reaching out and saying all the time, saying, "Hey, how's it going? How can I help?" It's not going to work. So networking is much more than expanding your network. It's deepening and enriching the current relationships that you have.
Well, John, I want to bounce a little bit to some of the strategy, and especially I want to speak a little bit to the XFL, because it's such a compelling story to look at, because it really was a cultural phenomenon. I mean, anyone that was around and into sports at that time, you couldn't miss it. It truly was. So I kind of want to hear whatever you can tell from that kind of behind the scenes of crafting that story of, being sort of WWE meets sports, or, this is a different kind of football. Like how intentional was the narrative that was built? How did you guys know what was working and was not working? And, looking back, were there mistakes made, or were there ultimately, did things go as you guys expected?
I think where to start on this is the beginning. Years ago, the USFL, the original USFL, was out there as a spring football league. And there was a lot of interest. I remember having season tickets for the New Jersey Generals and watching Herschel Walker play.
Oh,
And so for years, I think Vince McMahon, who is he ran for many years, and I believe he's still involved significantly in WWE. Back then, it was WWF, World Wrestling Federation. And he was talking with a gentleman named Dick Ebersol,
yep.
who at the time was the president of NBC Sports. And he was also early in his career, he was started Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
People don't remember this part of the story. And you have this huge media company in NBC Sports and another huge media company that flew under the radar because nobody thought of WWE as a media company, but it really was.
Totally.
Back in 2000, right? In the year 2000, 99, 2000, they started this thing in earnest. And when it came together, it was white hot. It was like lightning in a bottle. There was so much buzz around it. I remember being, on the cover of USA Today, Sports Illustrated, and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, like all on the same day. Just absolutely incredible. And I have a few stories to share, but ultimately, I think the reason why that version of it failed was that there was a bit of an overpromise to the advertisers, and the revenue just never materialized on the back end. So I can remember the very first game was the New York, New Jersey Hitmen, which is the team I was the director of or VP of communications for, I think, versus the Las Vegas Outlaws. So we went out to Vegas, and I'll never forget sort of that line of headlights streaming into the stadium parking lot, even after the game had begun. And I was standing in our radio booth, and up behind me, unbeknownst to me, walks Peter King. And I didn't see who it was, but he stood next to me. And then all of a sudden this voice says, "Man, this could really work."
Wow.
It was Peter King. So another fun story was the team, my team, the Hitmen. We were having a rough start. I think that first game we lost like 6-0, and then we really having trouble scoring the points. Our coach decided to just sort of do 3 yards cloud of dust kind of thing, and so not a lot of passing. And there was a former wrestler named Jesse Ventura, Jesse the Body Ventura,
Your governor.
who went on to become the governor of Minnesota. I know this sounds fake, but it's real. And in his role as governor, he was chiming in on what was happening in the XFL because I guess Vince McMahon put him up to it. And so he went on New York radio, ESPN or The Fan, and just started ameliorating our coach. Throw the ball, Rusty. Rusty Tillman was this like gray hair, crazy looking, red-faced guy who was awesome guy, but he was like a special teams coach. We got him from the Minnesota Vikings, and he would just yell and scream and run up and down the sideline. His face would turn all red, and he Jesse the Body Ventura went on the radio and just challenged him to throw the ball more. And then later in the week, Tillman went on the broadcast, the same broadcast, and said, if he wants to come down here and show me the ropes, I'll take care of him. It was like almost like a challenge to a duel. It was just a really weird, strange battle that was brewing the week we were going to play at Soldier Field. So we show up at Soldier Field, and obviously NBC has the game. Jesse the Body of Ventura was hired as one of the color analysts in the game. Perfect. We were so Soldier Field intentionally, the Chicago Enforcers, which is the name of their team, didn't cover the field. And it was a torrential downpour 3 days before. So we were all standing in 3 inches of mud. And I remember we won that game. It was our first game. I think we were 0-3, and that was the first game we won. And I knew something was coming. And I look up in the stands, and my job was to escort the head coach from the sideline to to the post media availability, post game media availability. And I look up in the stands, and down is walking Jesse, the body of Ventura, from his perch within the stadium. So he was sitting out in the elements just like everybody else was. And I'll never forget, there's a picture of me somewhere in between these two gigantic men, as seemingly they're about to throw blows. It was just really an incredible. It's a great experience, especially as a young communications person, to learn and grow and make mistakes. But it was also, in many ways, the theater of the absurd.
I mean, I'm sure you can probably write multiple books of just tons of stories of just excitement and fun. But even listening to you tell these stories, like, there are elements that are still very relevant today that, and maybe in some ways were remnants of that or derivative of that. I mean, think about how WWF even and WWE grew. It truly was, a heel versus face and like, good versus bad. And I think about now of hot takes and debates, and everything is, is this guy, who's the GOAT, or is this player the best player in the league, or is this player, the GOAT? And like, you guys, WWE, and it was kind of onto something, and maybe that's still like what we look at now in driving opinions, driving a lot of strong feelings. Is that storytelling something that truly is inherent and rooted in what helps drive some of these sports narratives and sports media stories and just interest overall? Do you have to set up that narrative of, give someone something to debate in the barbershop, give someone that good old fashioned, storytelling of good versus bad? Like, how much of that is just baked into any sort of comms strategy, whether it's, in sports or beyond?
Well, comms shouldn't be part of the execution only. The real key for all of these other leagues, USFL and XFL, is the product. As the product is getting developed, you need to think about quality, the quality of the game, the quality of the product that you're putting on national television. And if that's good, if that generates highlights and rivalries and star power, man, now you're onto something. Now you can start to create and amplify some stories. Ultimately, it's about putting the right people in place to create an amazing product that you can deliver to the marketing communications folks and say, go run with it.
So it's truly not necessarily crafting a narrative. It's getting seeing what's going on in the competition and then building off of that.
Yeah, I think it's helping to position the product in a way that is attractive to viewers and fans.
Let's build on that, and I want to kind of also jump into a little bit of your time with NASCAR as well, just because that's an organization that truly, I mean, over the decades has had a strong culture, a strong fan base, and particularly the last few years, it has definitely evolved their just what they want to stand for as an organization, and what they want to have their fans embrace and not embrace in some ways as well. Like, what was NASCAR hoping to do? I mean, we're always hoping to grow, I'm sure, and grow and broaden the fan base, drive TV ratings. But what did NASCAR look like from a cultural perspective and just cultural cachet, and how they lined up against other sports leagues, perhaps, and what were kind of the aspirations, and what leverage could you pull to activate against those aspirations?
I joined NASCAR in mid 2011, and the sport had a lot of problems, and they were not shy about talking about them. Mm-hmm. If you went to a racetrack, you didn't know where to go, where to sit, where to get a headset, who to talk to. If you ended up, in the right place, sitting and watching the race in the grandstand or somewhere else, you couldn't talk to the person next to you. You had no idea how the scoring system, because it was so loud. You had no idea what the scoring system works. You didn't know if you could. Most tracks didn't accept credit cards. And there's a high barrier for entry for new fans for that reason, particularly people of color and other underserved communities. Mm-hmm. So NASCAR was trying to get younger, more diverse, more mainstream. And all the while, it was trying to buy back its digital rights. So in other words, Turner, TNT, had the digital rights, which means that it operated and ran the website and profit shared with NASCAR on the revenue. And it also operated the social media platform handles. Think about that for a second.
Wow.
But a network partner running our social media accounts.
That's unreal.
The NASCAR, yeah, I mean, it was just a seminal moment for NASCAR, really. We were entering into that key phase where we needed to launch a new race car. And that had to go well because we were in the midst of negotiating our media rights, which we ended up doing a $8.2 billion deal back then with NBC and Fox, and which is now up. So look for NASCAR to be making moves here in the next year or so. And it was really a difficult time. I mean, this is when the Confederate flag was flying proudly at racetracks. Yeah. You think about just that symbol and how it alienates people. Our CEO at the time used to say that, that flag belongs in a museum, not at a racetrack. Yeah. And so really, and then the other dynamic was the ecosystem, the tracks, the teams, and the drivers, and NASCAR all sort of seemingly working against each other. The teams are competing with each other for sponsorship dollars on and off the racetrack. They're fighting with the tracks about track conditions and sharing revenue. The drivers are complaining about this and that, and really there was no integration whatsoever. And so NASCAR had done a great job. I mean, let's remember, NASCAR started in the backwoods of Georgia when these moonshiners decided that they need to soup up their cars. They would turn their cars and stock cars into race cars to outrun the police.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah, and years later, when the Pilgrims brought NASCAR to the shores of Daytona Beach, in 1948, when they got all the owners together and said, "We're going to do a real series. We're going to have points, and it's going to be great." And this is what NASCAR was founded on. And so, for years and years, NASCAR did a fantastic job making it easier and more convenient for journalists to cover the race. And there was massive coverage, especially in the late 80s, and in the 90s, really huge. And even into the early 2000s, that's what 90s and 2000s were huge for NASCAR. But ultimately, NASCAR needed to evolve, and it did. And part of that was installing an integrated marketing communications team to really ensure we had stakeholder relationship groups. We had people working on the digital and social side. We had somebody focusing solely on business, someone focusing solely on our work with the media networks, solely on sponsorship, and really making sure that comms was embedded in every function of the business. And today, NASCAR, I think this weekend, NASCAR's racing in Chicago on a road course. I mean, who would have thought downtown Chicago would be the host of NASCAR? And they've got this amazing app where you can you're at the track and you can actually watch 20 or 30 different camera angles for free on your phone. It's incredible. And so they've come a long way with I admire so much what they did when in the wake of officials finding a Confederate flag hanging in the stall of Bubba Wallace, and they ended up banning the Confederate flag, and it was at the height of Black Lives Matter. I was so proud of the work that NASCAR did. So they've come a long way. I think it just goes to show you, they turned 75 this year. So they've come a long way in 75 years, from a small family-owned business to one today that's on the precipice of doing, historic media rights deals and running races in the LA Coliseum and on the streets of Chicago.
And do you truly have to have those, not necessarily a hard conversation, but at least an intentional conversation saying, hey, this is a direction we're going to go, or we're going to make this stance. And we realize that might cost us, some non-zero portion of our fans who are not going to agree with that.
Yeah. I'm assuming you're talking about the evolution of NASCAR and where, the sport hired an agency actually to go out, Taylor Strategy actually, to go out and conduct about 300 interviews with people from all over the ecosystem to talk about what they thought the sport needs. And they came up with, and NASCAR came up with this sort of 5-point plan that would really re-energize the sport. And I think, that combined with, banning the Confederate flag, combining with drivers like Bubba Wallace and Daniel Suarez and Kyle Larson, all products of the NASCAR Drive for Diversity program, having success on the racetrack, has really position the sport to become future proof. And I think the leadership there has done an amazing job. President Steve Phelps and Eric Nyquist and Lisa France Kennedy and Ben Kennedy and Jim France, just really incredible work. The teams have come together in a big way. You saw the Hendrick team went to the 24 Hours Le Mans and won it on using just incredible will and determination to bring a really badass race car to the Le Mans. So I can't say enough about the folks at NASCAR, and it's really an example of how a sport reimagined itself.
Totally. A few minutes left here with John Schwartz, who just has so much good experience and knowledge that we are dipping into here. I'm gonna go from one big organization to another, and I want to talk a little bit about NFL, because you were there at such an important time for the league that I think they came out much better from it, during the Black Lives Matter movement. And I want to hone in on what it was like behind the scenes, with as much as detail as you're able to divulge, when that player-driven video came out, when Brendan Minter and players got together and made that video. At least to my knowledge, the league was not aware of it until it came out. And just what it was like internally, what the conversations were like, what the reaction was like, and ultimately how you guys came out, better for it.
I think this is a lesson about how much the voice of employees matters. We had an employee, we had hired a brand new head of digital and social who's great. He was doing his thing. He was assembling this. His name is Ian Trombetta. He did a phenomenal job. And there was a member. Yeah, he's from LA, exactly. So he had a member of his team named Brandon Minter, who, along with a group of employees, got together and worked with the players. Because Brandon had a relationship with these players to come up with this video expressing their support for Black Lives Matter and challenging the league to do the same. Yeah. And I think, it was a very interesting moment. It was a moment, I think, of the people, and it really underscored the importance of listening and responding. And I think in the wake of that, the league was doing really good things with Inspire Change, its social justice platform before that, but it really doubled down with it afterwards. The commissioner recorded a really heartfelt video in which he said Black Lives Matter, and we fully support you. But it really, in that moment, and of course, millions and millions of dollars were funneled to Inspire Change in the wake of that experience. But I think it underscored the voice of the employee. And, there was another group of employees that, nowadays these employee resource groups are really strong and powerful. They do have a voice. And I have a real passion connection with the LGBTQ plus community. And so I, as an ally, joined the ERG for LGBTQ plus. And they were getting great support from the league office. They were getting about $10,000 a year, and they were putting, they were putting that. I mean, that's a good chunk of change for an ERG, and they were putting that money towards the Gay Pride Parade. But it felt a little check the box. The group felt it was a little performative, and so they said we really want something that really doesn't cost a lot of money at all, and that's a campaign around Pride. And so the challenge was, we were a few of us in this group, and this wasn't our day job. Nobody was assigned to it. It wasn't my responsibility. It wasn't, any of my colleagues' responsibilities. But we had a chance to put together a campaign. So I raised my hand and said, I'll drive, and I'll need some help from you all. But I was able to get a few people together from marketing and advertising and the NFL Network and NFL Media and the social media team. And we created a really cool campaign. Troy Vincent, who is a cisgender African-American male, who's the top football official for the NFL, the next to Roger Goodell, who's a devout Christian. He penned an op-ed about coming out in the NFL, and how locker room environment is a safe place for you to do that. And I'll never forget, about a week after we launched the campaign, a woman who I had never met. She's 3,000 miles away at in the NFL offices in Los Angeles. She used the website we created for NFL Pride to come out.
Wow.
Person. And for me, that was a huge moment to be part of something like that was so personal and intimate to her that she would use the platform to come out, and that then citing the fact that her employer really made her feel safe to do that. Just awesome. A year after that, Carl Nassib became the first active NFL player to come out.
Yeah.
And this year they're doing a big merchandise collection with a big fashion brand around Pride. So, it was an interesting time, but I think it reminded everybody the importance of listening to the voices of employees.
And when you guys look at a Pride campaign or a campaign around Black Lives Matter and having leadership come out and speak to it and ultimately take action as well, which is so important. I don't want to dilute this into an analytical conversation, but what are the KPIs? Like, how do you know that this is working? Are there things that you set out to do? This is what success will look like if we do this right.
The big KPI was doing it. Just doing it. Just the NFL getting behind a campaign for LGBTQ+. I mean, we didn't expect the kind of impact. We didn't expect huge number of social media impressions. We didn't expect to be able to pull off a public service announcement with Rob Gronkowski. We didn't expect anybody to say yes, and a bunch of current and former NFL players did. So just doing it, just getting out the door was a big KPI. And the sort of the bounce we got out of it was great. But ultimately doing it, which was, I still believe, was the right thing to do, was the big KPI.
When you look at sports properties today, how important are sports properties in furthering culture? Not to get too grandiose, but in some ways, sports culture or sports properties maybe followed culture. In other ways, I mean, heck, I did a whole report on this when I was in college, even around how American culture and sports culture kind of evolved together a little bit. You look at like Jackie Robinson and integrating Major League Baseball, and that came right around the time of Brown versus Board of Education and all that. Do you see sports as having a platform to be the first mover sometimes, or are these businesses too big and there's too much money at stake to take chances, and you kind of have to go where the tide is going?
I think it's not an exact science, and that's not a cop out.
Yeah.
But I believe that you need to really know and understand your audience before you do anything. And I think you have to understand and appreciate the sentiment in the marketplace. In this case, it's, whatever it is, baseball's got 30, 32 clubs, NFL, 30, 32 clubs, NHL, et cetera. What's going to resonate? Is there something good that's working in a certain market that will allow people to opt in across the league? Sometimes some of the best campaigns are coming from the local markets, as opposed to having the league create something and then jam it down your throat. So I hate to answer the question in such a mealy-mouthed way, but I really think it all depends. I was really proud that the league was brave enough to do what they did on LGBTQ+. And, there are some leagues that can do that, and there are some leagues that probably are struggling with it right now.
Love it, man. Just a couple minutes left here with John before he steps to a shareable stat. And I really want to just get your insight on this, because it really left a mark on me when we first spoke, is just how much you truly do appreciate being able to give back. And, whether it's working with special needs athletes or, doing the mentoring that you talked about earlier, and it seems like it's something that's really important to you. And just tell me, going from a very grinding, busy life of being at sports properties to, now truly embracing what was that I don't know if it was an inflection point in your life where you're just like, hey, I want to make sure I'm giving back. There's all these causes I care about that I want to do something about. And so, how did that come about for you? Give our listeners an idea of what you do, because I know it's a lot, and how important it is in being a part of your life.
So hockey played a huge role in my development. When I was 8 years old, I was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome and had all these different tics that I was dealing with. And games like baseball and basketball had a little too much downtime for me. But hockey was this five sensory experience. So taste, touch, smell, hear, see, and you had so much going on. There was so much stimuli that it really was something that worked for me. And so years later, I decided that it played such an important role in me developing self-confidence and physical fitness and socialization. But I partnered with a mother of a young boy who had autism to start this program in New Jersey called the New Jersey Daredevils. It's for people who have intellectual disabilities, children, adults, and give them an opportunity to play hockey. And at the time, there was about 10 or 15 teams in the whole nation, with about 250 people playing this special brand of hockey. Today, and I've been involved with the American Special Hockey Association, which sort of is the sanctioning body for all those teams. And today, we're at about 7,000 members and about 128 teams. So there's been massive growth of special hockey across the United States. And I've had some amazing experiences with these young men and women. And I'm so grateful for the role that they've played in my life. And I've gotten to do some really amazing things along the way.
Love hearing it. And we're going to learn a little bit more about you as a hockey player in our next segment. Just a lot more. There's so much more we can talk about, and we're going to talk a little bit more with our quick hitters coming up. But first episode's a shareable stat, and then we'll be right back with John. So good chatting with John Schwartz about his career, all the stuff he's done, all the things he's been part of, the stories he's told, the lessons that he's learned along the way. And I know I learned a lot from talking to him, and we're going to have some more fun with him with our quick hitting question segment. But first, this episode's shareable stat. This episode's shareable stat is about Snapchat. Nope, not about Threads, which is the flavor of the week as we can talk right now in July 2023. Not to say that Threads is not important. 100 million users seemingly overnight in less than a week is super impressive. But this is about Snapchat. And that is that Snapchat, as of Q1 2023, depending on which stat you look at, somewhere between 360 and 385 daily active users on Snapchat. Yes, the platform that I think many have abandoned in some ways, as far as the team side and league side. But you also see teams and leagues starting to embrace it more as well, and doing more focused things. You know, with MLB at the All-Star Game had a very focused Snapchat scavenger hunt. The NFL always does pay attention to Snapchat. And the reason I bring up this shareable stat today of 384 million daily active users worldwide is that Manchester United made big news this past week in tandem with Snapchat's sports partnerships team. They announced their presence on the platform. Manchester United, one of the biggest brands in the world, of course, the storied Premier League team, and they're just getting started on there. You know, if you go to their profile right now, you can follow along. You can see they posted, around a dozen spotlight stories or spotlight videos. Of course, their stories will expire at 24 hours, just like Snapchat does. But you can see some of their spotlight content. Their top spotlight video right now, as of this recording, has around 118,000 plays. Not much, of course, especially compared to their other platforms. If you go on their TikTok, you can see the average video has over 1 million plays. So a little ways to go for Manchester United to reach those big numbers, but Snapchat has a hell of a lot of users. Certainly more than Threads right now, more than Twitter, and more than other platforms where we're paying attention potentially. So for those of you that may have just dismissed Snapchat as a place to stay away from, it's one of those things. The lesson here is not to just completely dismiss a platform and say, well, we don't have the resources for it, so we're just going to leave it in the background for the foreseeable for perpetuity. It's not to say that you shouldn't necessarily leave some platforms aside because you don't want to half-ass it, and you don't need to be everywhere to everybody, but it's worth being able to go back and take a look and say, is this something new here? Is there something that we should be exploring on this platform? Is there something we can do here that we can't do elsewhere? Is there an audience here that is our fans or could be our fans that we're not reaching in some way? So, whether it's MLB at the league level doing something like their scavenger hunt, or, embracing lenses, or trying to do spotlight, or, trying to create a serialized content, or working with creators on the platform, Snapchat is not going anywhere and has not gone anywhere. And as this episode's shareable stat portrays, is still going pretty strong. And has much more daily active users than Twitter, for example, where of course sports teams and leagues continue to spend a lot of time, and rightfully so. So that's the shareable stat. 384 million daily active users as we speak today on Snapchat. So check it out. Check out what Manchester United is doing. Get a little feel for how they're launching on the platform, and continue to pay attention to it and have these conversations. And don't, again, just dismiss a platform, and continue to go back and learn and see what else is out there, and revisit things over time. All right, that's the shareable stat, but more importantly, stick around for more good stuff with John Schwartz. Right back from this episode's shareable stat, and I am joined once again by John Schwartz. John, had such a good time talking to you. I feel energized, stimulated, inspired. But are you now ready for some quick hits?
Let's do it.
All right, number one, I told the listeners and told you that hockey would come back up. So tell me, you mentioned you played club hockey in Maryland. Still are coaching now, helping out with the New Jersey Daredevils, among other organizations. Tell me the scouting report on John Schwartz, the hockey player. And if you reach the absolute pinnacle and beyond of your skill set, which NHL player would you most take after?
Well, I'll do the first part. Very gritty. Okay, was standing behind the net and get whacked at. Right in the slot area. Not afraid to go into the corners. Decent hands, although not great, but really good around the net. And if I was, I think, what did you say, 500% of my skill set, I think it would be a mix of, if I was a pro, it'd be a mix of Connor McDavid, Eric Lindros, and PK Subban, sort of willing to be physical, to go to the corner, throw a big hit, maybe scrap, but also can skate and shoot and have great hands. So I definitely put my teammates first.
I can see you getting in those dirty areas and getting those greasy goals, maybe like a Patrick Hornquist or Corey Perry or something like that as well.
Yep.
Oh, I love it. I'm picturing in my head John Schwartz going around the ice and taking names and deking guys out as well. All right, number two. This should be a fun one as well. We talked a bit about the XFL. So tell me the XFL or Vince McMahon story, whichever you prefer. That's just your favorite story to tell, or that lasting memory that sticks in your mind from that time in your life.
Yeah, I mean, being in meetings with Vince McMahon and Dick Ebersol, it was such an opportunity to listen, learn, and watch those two men deal with one another and deal with the staff, and how methodical they were, how well they worked together, and how talented they were in each of their own ways, how intellectual they were. And I think that was a really, and it still is a special combination. Those two are still friends. So I guess I was struck by Vince's acumen and his business prowess, because the way obviously he's portrayed on TV is in a little bit in the way between a buffoon and a villain, which is not the case.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, and to your point, we think of these guys, especially Vince McMahon, as like this character, this hyperbole caricature, and he's a shrewd businessman. That the success of WWE did not happen by accident.
That's right.
Number three, tell me, we talked a bit about working with special needs athletes and some of the great work you do there. So tell me the most important lesson you've learned from working with those athletes. I imagine there's a ton of them, but what's the most important lesson that sticks with you?
I would say service before stardom. Young people really struggle with this. They want this instant gratification. And I know that's a stereotype, but do the work. It's not about you. Improve somebody else's life, and it'll pay off. I mean, my drives home from the rink are some of my most favorite times of the week, because I get to reflect on all these relationships I built and the impact they've had on me.
Love that. And spoken like a true coach and teacher as well. I'm sure just seeing your students succeed, it just gives you that gratification also. And just the value of service. That's awesome to hear. Number four for you, John, tell me the most memorable event. It could be a race, or it doesn't have to be, from your time at NASCAR.
Well, on the track is probably watching Dale Earnhardt Jr. win the Daytona 500, which was great. He'd been a victim of a pretty long winless streak, so that was that. But when I was in NASCAR, I had a really amazing experience one morning. It was after the July Daytona race. I was on my way into work in NASCAR's New York City office one morning, and my train's coming into the station. And all of a sudden, I heard this big thud, and I looked down in front of me, and there was a woman lying in the subway with her head bleeding. She was knocked unconscious. She had fainted. So I grabbed her. This is quintessential New York story. I went down and I grabbed her. I pulled her up. Another kid helped me with her legs. I sat her up on the steel girder. The train pulls in. People get on. People get off. The train pulls away, like it never happened. As she's coming to, I'm sort of like kind of go through her purse just to see if I can. And she wakes up. She thinks, in her mind, she thinks she's being mugged or attacked.
Yeah.
Right? Thinking that she was hit over the head or something, which obviously wasn't what it was. So anyway, that was an amazing story. I called the police station the next day and I said, "Hey, this happened. I just wanted to make sure the woman is okay." And they're like, "Hold on. Yeah. Hold on." And he's like, they were probably saying, "This guy's full of crap," blah, blah, blah. Well, he comes on the phone. He said, "Yeah, she's okay. She's in a local hospital recovering. We gave her your name and address. And, oh, yeah, by the way, you had 18 seconds. So what do you mean?" He said, "You had 18 seconds from the time that she fell onto the tracks into the time she would have been cut in half by the train."
Shit.
So she was working a job as a administrative assistant at an small electrical company in Long Island City and traveling from the Pocono Mountains. So it was taking her almost 3 hours each way to get to work. And today she has her master of social work and she works with children who have special needs, which is kind of ironic.
That's incredible. That's amazing. Jeez, man. What a story. Wow. I don't know how we can follow up that, but we're gonna try. Number 5 for you, John. Tell me, if you think about that, like before and after moment in your career, your professional career of social media and sports, like what is that inflection point where it's like, okay, this was the before times, now we're in the after times because whatever. We have our Facebook page now, and we should manage it. Or the social media stuff is not just for college kids anymore. We gotta look at, like, if you think about that moment in time where it's the BC AD or whatever you want to call it for social media and sports. What was that for you in your career?
I think for me and for everybody who sort of experienced this, it was Twitter changing the way sports and almost everything was reported. It's the way in which people gained influence and built up their brand by breaking news, and it made them more valuable, especially if they were right. Now, the downside of it is a lot of people went before they were able to validate the news. But, it used to be that there was a 24-second news cycle. And now if you're at a race or a sporting event, it's a 24-second news cycle. So I would say that was the big inflection point.
It's just totally different when you can sit on a story until the overnight, and now that's like unheard of. You can't sit on a story like by the time you finish saying it to somebody, it's already been broken by somebody else.
Right.
It's incredible. I imagine for someone sitting in the communications or marketing role, it was a game changer for sure. Number 6, tell me you worked with both the Big Ten and the NFL. So tell me what's the biggest difference in your experience from working at college football versus the NFL? And of course, college football, you were there at a very volatile time for the sport also with NIL and realignment and all that.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten is 127 years old, right? So they, for so many years, operated kind of like a mom and pop shop, believe it or not. Really small staff, did things sort of the traditional old way, and we had a new commissioner come in right before COVID, who's now the president and CEO of the Chicago Bears. and he came in and really started pushing pushing all of us to act like an NFL team. So really do things that were above and beyond. Really put a priority on diversity. Really put a priority around driving business and driving revenue and building the brand reputation. And because he knew that the media rights were coming up, and as a result, the Big Ten did these historic deals last year, and really was on the front foot when with respect to expansion, adding schools like USC and UCLA. So yeah, really really different. The only similarities really is just the football. I mean, high quality football, time honored traditions, and some of the greatest fans in the world.
Totally. I mean, those Big Ten schools, that you're not going to get better traditions than a game of the Big House or the Shoe or any of these other just venerable institutions. Number 7, I'm going to take you back to college yourself, though, as a student. Going back to your time at Maryland, what was the most memorable game from your time there across any sport? What was that? What's that game that you look back in time as a student that just sticks out for you?
My game, scoring 2 goals at Delaware, including the game winner. I didn't have much time to go to other sports.
I love that. What were the facilities like for you guys? Was there a rink that you guys just rented ice time when you had games? Yeah.
We practiced at the same practice facility where the Washington Capitals used to practice.
Oh, wow.
In suburban Maryland.
That's super cool. In Maryland now, does they still have a club hockey team? Are they looking to go deep at some point?
Yeah, I don't know about that, but listen, they're in a conference with great hockey: Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. So I never say it's impossible.
Powerhouse now. I know Arizona State was an ACHA powerhouse before they went D1. So it's not without precedent to make that move at some point.
That's right. Same with Penn State, and look at where they are.
Number 8. It's time for our food question, John. Always love to ask our food question on the podcast. We love it. Tell me, if I come out there and hang out with you in New York, what's the best meal to get in New York, and where do we get it?
You get it at Rayo's, except I've never been, and it's a dream of mine to go. So if you have any hookups, Neil, please let me know. But that would be the place I would go.
So what is it? Just a specialty restaurant where you have to get
really the history around, owned by Frank Pellegrino, I believe, in the Pellegrino family for years. Before he passed a few years ago, and it's an Italian restaurant in Harlem. They serve great food, tiny little dining room. Legend has it that like Robert De Niro has a table there every night. And that one time when Madonna was touring in New York, she showed up at the restaurant to see if she could get in, and she was turned away.
Oh, geez.
So it is extremely hard to get a reservation at Rayo's.
Well, okay. Well, if Madonna can't get a table, then I don't think there's much hope for you and me, man. Number 9. Tell me, you look across, it could be past or present, the athlete whose presence in social media or media in general that you feel has been the most impactful or among the most impactful, and why?
Well, I think you have to look at, there are a couple examples. I mean, you look at the Manning family, which they're seemingly on every media platform these days. And they're creating content, and they have the Omaha Productions, and they're doing all this great stuff. But, I think LeBron is really the best example. But LeBron has enough money to do anything he wants. He's a billionaire. He's the CEO of his own brand. And I think he represents the future of sports ownership. I think that we're watching. There's no question in my mind we're watching future CEOs play in the NBA and the NFL.
Yeah,
no question. And it's really a matter of how they manage their money, how they manage their environment, and how they capitalize on opportunities. And so you're seeing them get involved in investment groups that are buying teams. And and they're gonna get even larger stakes in these teams moving forward, because sports franchise values are continuing to go up.
Holy, I mean, heck, look at Michael Jordan recently. I mean, and he kind of invented the paradigm of owning your brand a little bit more than just taking a check from a brand. And then, of course, just recently, turned his nest egg with the Charlotte Hornets into a heck of a return. So,
sure did.
more owners to come from the athlete field. All right, last one for you here, John. This is a good one to end on. Tell me the lasting piece of advice that you hope stay with the students that you teach and you mentor. Like, what's that one piece of advice that you want to make sure sticks with them?
Well, I have a few, if you'll indulge me. One is measure twice, cut once. It's the old carpenter's axiom, right? You want to be sure that you are being really measured and thoughtful before you waste all this time and money having to go out and buy extra wood, right? So measure twice, cut once. Another piece of great advice I got along the way was don't buy back the sale. After you've said something, after you've come to an agreement, shut up. Don't say anything more. Don't buy back the sale.
Good one.
Another one that one of my favorites is the juice ain't worth the squeeze. Don't fall on the sword over the little stuff.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorites is people don't care how much you know, they care how much you care. And that for me, has really stuck with me, not just in my professional life, but in my personal life. And I guess I'll leave you with one last one. There's a lot of people out, a lot of really good people out there, really talented in their craft, masters of their craft, if you will. I would say for those folks, and I'm sure you have a number of them listening, just remember, there are times in your career that the game is coming to you. So stop trying so hard.
Love this. I want to write all these down, man. You're just a fount of great insight. Like I said, it's stuff that will stick with you and inspire you and keep you going for sure. But now it's your chance to take over the podcast, John. Tell us your social media all-star to follow. Just tell us who they are. It can be on or off social media. Just tell us who they are, where to find them, and why they're worth following.
I love what Rex Chapman is doing on Twitter. He's a must-watch for me every day. I love to. His commentary is great, but I love to see the way in which he curates content is really, really special. And he's reinvent. I like people and brands that reinvent themselves. And he's done that. And it's been a fun journey to watch for him.
Totally. I mean, I think back even from like the blocker charge days to like Dog Pro and now just every happy thing that comes across his timeline. It's just a great source of just positive energy, it seems like, and fun content. That's
right. And we all need it.
Hell yeah. How about you, John? Where can we find you as well as anything else that you're working on digital social media?
John Schwartz 1 on Twitter and LinkedIn.
There we go. Check him out. John's got a lot going on. He's finishing up a course right now at NYU, has another course starting up soon. And just cannot thank you enough for sharing all your knowledge and experience today. So much good insight, so much good stuff that's going to stick with me. I look forward to more good chats in the future, man.
Neil, it was an honor and a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me, for preparing so well, and for carrying this message to your listeners about the importance of reaching out and helping others develop and providing them with insights from a wide variety of people. So thanks for all the good work that you do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's a pleasure and a privilege, and to get to meet people like you. So good chatting and learning from John Schwartz. Just so many good things, and it could really hear him storytell all day about his experiences with NASCAR, with the XFL, with the NFL. Hope you enjoyed it, because I certainly did, and came away learning a lot as well. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. As always, you can check out every episode and more content at dsmsports.net. Follow along on your preferred podcast platform for the next episode, and follow me on Twitter, NJH287, also on Threads at NJH287, and of course LinkedIn, where you can connect with me there and see more content. But until next time, this is your host, Neil Horowitz, signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.